Craig Brain is not your brain or my brain. Love it or hate it or something in between. Welcome to the squishy, alien middle inside of this dude's skull. Take a peek. Take a peek.
Hey, it's Craig Gross. You're watching, listening, reading Craig Brain. Episode 21, Christian Cannabis. So I guess the disclaimer on this episode is I wasn't sure whether or not the announcement of this company or project fits here on this project called Craig Brain. But then I was like, it's old news because I've done this, but yeah, it fits. And here's why it's here. Because if you've been watching now 20 episodes of this, episode 3 when I talked about the spa day and episode 7 when I talked about the mints and marijuana, there's a lot been going on and a lot been kind of changing in my worlds. And a lot of that's just been started with being honest and being open and being transparent and vulnerable and going, man, I'm just going to share what's happening, what's changing. Episode 19, I talked about my departure from XXX Church. And it's funny because on a timeline, you can't really, like I have a podcast and I have things that I wanted to talk about. And then we tried to organize them in sections and then roll things out that made sense in that order, not necessarily in an order where it was like, hey, I should talk about this or I should hold back on this conversation because I haven't told you that I'm leaving XXX Church. So all that's to say is, like, when we launched Christian Cannabis on 4/20 of 19, I had not made any announcements about XXX Church and my position there and me moving into I wouldn't say leaving, but moving off the field into a coaching type role on the sideline. And I got asked to turn in my resignation from XXX Church from a friend, just one. I had, a church say they dropped support. And I wanted to tell people just settle down for a bit. Like, I'm not an idiot. I'm 43. I think I'm smarter today than I was 2 years ago, 10 years ago for sure. Going back to Tom Brady, it's like Tom Brady's not the biggest, best athlete, but he's freaking smart because he's been in every situation on that football field more than any other quarterback. And he's actually not only survived them, but he's actually like won in those situations. So it's like you want the ball in his hands at 43, even though there's a better fit athlete coming out of the draft. But I mean, we saw that in the Super Bowl with Jared Goff's experience versus Tom Brady's. Like, not even a matchup. Sorry, Jeanette. She's a Rams fan. Moment of silence for that. They'll be back. I don't really think so. But go Pack, go. But all that's to say is, so this episode, I wrote some things that you could find on the Christian Cannabis site, but I wanted to include it here and talk about it because since the launch, there's been obviously a lot of people saying things that I don't know if they're true, or if people interpreting things that I've said and taking just liberties to tell me what I need to do or what I shouldn't do. And the full context of this story, I've shared all of it here from 2013 in my introduction to marijuana and me wanting to talk about it and listening to friends who said, hey, don't share that yet. And then when I found this domain for sale on an auction, it was called ChristianCannabis.com. I mean, the idea, my mind spun up this idea, and I really thought of the landscape of our world today remind me a lot about 2001, when I was planning the launch of XXX Church. Porn had come out on the internet, and nobody was talking about it, and every kid I dealt with was watching it. And I knew that was a major shift for people like me that grew up in a world where I couldn't find it and I had to work really hard to it. And now we're in a world where you had to work really hard not to see it. And so living in California and seeing the evolution of pot from 2013 now to 2019, I'm driving around town now, and I can't tell you, I see more advertisements for weed than I do alcohol today. And I felt like, hey, it's time now to share this this project, to start this. And so for context, like I bought the domain and I've been working on the idea with some friends for several months, which for me, once again, seems like several years. And there's other projects that I've talked about on here: Sit on My Gift, Resentment, a ton of things that you've heard about in 20 episodes where I had an idea, I did it, I wrote it, we launched it in a month, and just let it go. And so this wasn't one of those. This wasn't a reaction to something. This wasn't I wonder if I should do this. It was I've been wanting to share this story for years, but I didn't ever feel it was time. So last March, I felt it was time to at least tell my kids and stop hiding. And I went live on Facebook in March of 2018, and didn't blast out an email, didn't make an announcement, didn't send a press release, but I just said, hey, I want to share this information with you, and I'm not hiding, but I just want to talk about how I've found some help with cannabis. But I didn't say, and I'm starting a company and I'm starting a project. I didn't feel like I wasn't there yet. But I guess what led me to this, buying the domain, and I had a vision for, could we create a hub or a central location that was able to speak to the church and Christians about something and target a conversation to the main evangelical Christian movement. And that's the world I've lived in for 20 years, or really 40 years of my whole life. From being, in a Christian school my whole life, to a Christian college, to a church, to a nonprofit parachurch ministry, to speaking at more churches than I think most people I know across the board, all over the world. And I felt like at this point in my life, there's another opportunity in front of me that reminds me of something I did when I was in my 20s with XXX Church. And, I have some other opportunities and some other things that really excite me that are brand new for me. But this one felt like I know exactly how to do this, how to start a conversation. It's not about pot. It was about a conversation that was non-existent. It reminded me of everything about XXX Church when we started, other than the fact that now I'm 43, I think, with a lot more knowledge and wisdom under my belt of how to go about this, that I wasn't just coming out to shock people or to scare people or to just be controversial. But it really came from a deep place of, I wouldn't do this if I didn't think it would be helpful. And I didn't do this if I didn't think it would succeed. And I've talked a little bit about that. Like, I just don't do things that I don't do well at. There's a video on my Instagram about me doing karaoke. If you want to see me doing something really bad, I like to do things that I know I can have some success with, or I have some experience. I think it's good to try new things, but this isn't a new thing for me. I know how, in my travels, speaking with some of the largest churches in America, sitting down with pastors, I felt there was a lack of, like, what I once thought was just people were too scared to talk about it. I realized most pastors sitting in congregations today have not had personal experiences with cannabis or the freedom to explore it while they are pastors. So it's just same thing. I just don't want to talk about what I don't know about. And I know a little bit more than maybe the average pastor with no experience, but I don't know anything compared to a lot of these people that have worked with these types of medicines. But I know a little bit more. And so with a little bit more knowledge, could I pave the way for a conversation and open up some things? And it was just one of those interesting things where I started building a website with content. I mean, I've never combed over content and words before like I did on this site. My friends or people that work with me, they know I send an email or a blog post, or I'll write something or transcribe something on audio, and it will be 60% there. It won't be edited. There won't be periods. There won't be the right words. And then it's like, you take it from here. Even all this Craig Brain stuff is a bunch of chicken scratch that, hey, Levi's helped me really articulate. Christian Cannabis, it's like I worked with some friends and we really worked on like, how do we communicate this and how do we make sure we don't say that? And I felt like we got it to the place where it was like, hey, I think it's time to share this. And it was on a way to Los Angeles with my son for an audition that we were driving, and I was just inundated with these billboards. And this was April, April maybe 8th, 2019. Coachella is 12 days away. And I saw all these billboards and I was like, oh my gosh, like Coachella's coming up. What about if I had a billboard headed in the desert on the way to Coachella? Well, 12 days out of Coachella. Actually, we went weekend 2 to Coachella. It's a 2-week biggest music festival. I wouldn't say by attendance, but it's the one that starts off the festival season. It's in California. If you're on the Coachella lineup, you're probably going to do every music festival, or that's going to set the tone and the stage for everything else this year. And so my son and I and friends have gone the last 3 years. And we were going weekend 2, which I didn't know fell on Easter weekend. And so I'm in the car and I told Nolan, hey, can you pull up billboard advertising in Palm Springs? And he found one. It was Lamar Advertising. Once again, I've done this before, actually in Palm Springs, not a Coachella weekend, but it was the biggest, cheapest bang for our buck to get a billboard that we put up early into XXX Church's launch. And it just said XXXchurch.com, the #1 Christian porn site. And we had a billboard on the freeway, and it was awesome. It made the news, and people talked about it, and nobody really. It was awesome. And we've done skywriting before, where over the beach on Labor Day weekend of the California coast, it said XXXchurch.com, the #1 Christian porn site, because they forgot the S, and that was fun. So we've done those things, outdoor advertising. And what I've learned is if it worked once, it probably worked twice. So I call through all these companies and they're like, dude, you're a little late on the Coachella bandwagon because there's a country music festival that follows Coachella. And so there's 3 weeks of a lot of traffic in Palm Springs. And they're like, it's $10,000 and every billboard on the way there and the way out is taken. I was like, all right. So I called a mobile place and they said they can drive around my message as people enter Coachella. But that was one of 7 billboards, like would be rotated on their truck. I was like, screw that. That's not going to work. So then I was like, what about the skywriting? If they could spell it right, that would be rad. So I got a hold of someone and they were like, we do sky lettering where the planes make the words and the letters and you can have 25 letters. So I start doing the math. I'm like, ChristianCannabis.com. Okay, they stay up for 5 minutes. We could put that message over the Coachella main stage. So I was like, that's awesome. And she's like, but I'm booked like all weekend. Except for on 4/20. And I didn't know anything about I knew 4/20 is like a date that is like a marijuana term. Didn't know what it meant, that there's 420 different, I don't even know the word, but like just the power of marijuana and cannabis and how many different things are going on, active ingredients in that. I just thought, it's a stoner date. But I was like, wait, it's 4/20? She goes, Saturday about 4 o'clock. And I jokingly, I was like, can you put it up at 4/20 on 4/20? She's like, I can't get it down to the exact, minute, but I have 1 spot left. And I was like, done. All right, send it over. How much? And it was really reasonable. And I was like, all right, 5 minutes, we'll go in the air. You'll put my message. Great. Awesome. Send me the contract. And my son says, Dad, are you ready? Do you have anything like for sale, or you don't have products? You don't have any of that? And I was just like, we're just going to make the announcement on Easter weekend on 4/20. And Coachella this year, Kanye West had something called Sunday Service. First time that Coachella's offered a morning attraction that was basically on Easter Sunday. That ended up being one of the most incredible things I've seen of just a worship service with Chance the Rapper, Francis and the Lights. I mean, I think DMX did the prayer. I mean, it was top things streamed on YouTube that day. You know, all these churches are having, you know, their events, and that's awesome. But like, man, he took us to church at Coachella, and it was just like, yeah, let's do it. So for 12 days, for me, I'm thinking about my podcast. I'm thinking about, oh, well, I'm rolling this out here and this doesn't really fit because this could blow up a lot of things that I have going on over here. But I'd been waiting for like, not confirmation, but this idea of when do we actually roll this out? And I was convinced with what I'm seeing in California and where this kind of world is moving around cannabis that the time is now to start this conversation. So 12 days to launch, build a website out, launch a strategy that would hopefully land well with people, where people would be responsive of the message and not kill everything. It was just a lot going on. And I just remember my son was looking at how I operated, and he's like, and I was like, Nolan, I did this. You weren't even born yet. When we did this for Triple X Church, it's just like you start something, it's kind of like that dominoes, and it just starts to fall in place. Going back to that idea of trust. And so I'm very like, these aren't episodes like, oh, episode 20, we talked about this. And episode 18, I talked about trust. It's what you're getting here is just some of the things that I'm learning and I'm experiencing that go beyond like, I did that for this. It's like what I was hearing in March about learning to lose control, like allow not being so much in control and trusting and surrendering, I really felt like, hey, it's time. I don't have a game plan, but do I trust the right people are going to show up in my inbox after we make the announcement? Do I trust that like my job in the ministry, the ministry of Triple X Church won't suffer because I'm starting this thing? Well, I already knew I'm changing roles there, and I already know there's somebody else coming along the way. Even though I haven't announced that, I'm just going to trust that it's going to be okay. I'm going to trust that this is the right time right now on the right weekend. I've never seen where you've got 420 and Easter and all what was happening around me in my life. My wife's just coming off of a retreat where I think she found just herself, things happening in her family where we're prepared for this. And bottom line is I wasn't going in this one alone. My full support of my wife and some friends to say, hey, I think let's go. And we felt like, let's do it. And so what you're going to read on this is, you can read it on this episode, or you can read it on Christian Cannabis site, was the announcement then, like why and where and how we got here. Because I think some people still have questioned me on that, like, oh, you're just so flippant and you just want to shock people and you just want to go do this. And no, once again, I'm not that guy I was at 25. I didn't need to do this. I wasn't forced to do it. I was very strategic in why and where we did it. And what was to come from it was really about trusting and surrendering that, like, hey, the right things are going to happen, and the right people are going to show up. And I don't have time to tell you about all those things today. A guy that just spent 2 hours with me in this studio for some podcasts that we are doing on the Christian Cannabis site, from people that I never would have known were involved inside the cannabis industry that have knocked on my door, from people that have had huge benefits of this. And one of the things that happened was, I knew this would make a splash. I knew people would talk about it. I know when we launch something, not that everybody listens, but it's like, yeah, this is going to be controversial, but I think I have 18 years of experience now in Triple X Church where people are going, oh, I can't believe you did that, and it's worked out. And we've proven the course over years that we're invested in helping people, not just shocking people. So part of me sometimes thinks, oh, well, I got it, I'm good. But I also go, oh, man, this is crazy. And so Tristan, who works with me, said, hey, have you thought about contacting a PR firm? And I was like, oh, dude, we know how to do that. Like, we'll make a splash and they'll call. But it was another kind of awareness of like, oh, maybe we should get some help because maybe we're walking into something. And I was like, who wants to take this on? And there's a Christian PR firm out of Texas that I was like, I don't think they'll want this, but they've known me and they've worked with me on a bunch of projects that they haven't been scared of. And so I called them, and it was that first call where they go, well, why don't you reach out to somebody ahead of time and let them know of your plan? And I hit one of the most respected religion writers that we know. I don't know him. I just read his stuff, and I DM'd him on Instagram. Hey, I'm working on a project. You might know me from this, and I'd love to talk to you about what I'm doing. And I thought maybe I'll invite him to Coachella. Maybe he needs to see this. And it turns out he knew. He said a few years ago he knew he would write this story, and he was just waiting for the right person to come along and not force it. And he has a personal experience with cannabis that cut the nerve pain in his arm. And so not only did he say, I'll write the story, I'll share my story. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you'll share that? You'll do that? And never forget talking to him in the studio with my son, who's working on a record, on a song, which I talked to you about prior. And then I'm on a phone call with a guy. I'm like, he just sold the story to the New York Times. And he's coming out in favor of cannabis, and he's going to help us tell this story. And it wasn't just a smile on my face. It was like, oh, yeah, it's time. And the funny part about that is, like, I can hear from God. I can know that, hey, this is what I'm supposed to do. But with trust and surrender, and I think what I learned is, like, my old self would be, oh, okay, cool. When's that going to go out? That needs to go out on 4/20, and then we fly the plane over, and then we make the announcement, and then we do all that. And guess what? None of that happened. If you could have been at Coachella with me on 4/20, the clouds came in around 2 o'clock and started covering the whole skies. And there was like one pocket that was clear, but it was right where the sun was. So the planes start flying somebody else's message. And I was like, you can't see it. And I'm literally on the phone going with the person that's talking to the pilots. And there's 5 planes. You can see the video. And I'm like, you can't see it. Oh, well, we got to tell them that. Now you got to move it. And I was like, how many more till my message goes up? And they're like 17. I was like, you're going to put 17 messages up before mine. No one's ever going to see it. And there's clouds are coming in. And so here's me just kind of freak out. And then just finally just going, hey, you got to just let that one go. And sure enough, when it was our turn and our time, it was visible. They showed up just in case they ran it 3 times instead of once. Because I was like, it was a little blurry on that one, which it was. And so we'll do it again. And then she's like, finally, like, last time. And we got the video. We got everything we needed. And then there was no New York Times. There was no big notice of like anyone at Coachella seeing it because they were paying attention to what was going on. But I knew that. I knew this wouldn't kind of shock somebody. And so we came home from Coachella and we're like, when do we want to roll out this video? Oh, well, when's this story coming out? When's that coming out? And so we were just like, hey, let's just trust that this was the right time and this is all going to work. And we came back and made a few phone calls, sent out a few things to some people. And this last month or two has been really exciting of the people that have knocked on our door. And as we start this company and grow this company, it reminds me a lot of 2002 when we launched at a porn show, and then people in the industry reached out to us and said, hey, we actually like you guys, and thanks for coming here. Would you come back? So as we talk about making some inroads in the cannabis world, we've met some great people. We've had some amazing conversations. We've, I think, showed up on podcasts and everything from Weed Maps to Vice Magazine to just a number of other places where there's a lot of interest, and there's a lot of people obviously on the Christian side going, I'm not sure yet what I think or what I don't think about it, but that's okay too. And so if you read the post that I put up, it's a little bit more behind the scenes of why we did what we did when we did it. And just for context for you to know, this has been a long process for me of sorting through that. And eventually, I love the quote from Seth Godin. I say it all the time. It doesn't count till it ships. And there's something about being first. On a future episode, I talk about my wife and I and the differences of being a pioneer versus a builder. One's not better than the other. But I found myself, it helps me with language of knowing, oh man, I'm really feel called and in my DNA of just who I am to be a pioneer, to be somebody that knows, hey, I want to go first. And I think it was important for us as I saw all this stuff kind of coming and this world changing with cannabis, going, hey, I want to be the first one to kind of launch this inside the Christian space. I want to be a leader, not a follower. And that's not for everybody. There's extreme risk and there's extreme, like I had a friend of mine, huge pastor of a huge church, say, why are you scared, Craig? Like you did this 18 years ago. You do this and blow things up and then I'll walk through and the rest of us in churches, it will be a lot easier. And so that's why I was like, he was actually the final piece on April when I sat down with him and I just said, what do you think about this? And so I talked to people. I talked to my family. I talked to pastors. I talked to my local church pastors here of saying, hey, what do you think about this? And I was tired of the church not having an answer. And beyond an answer, I was tired of the church not even willing to have the conversation. So can pastors use this? Can people in their congregation use this? Why aren't we talking about it? What do we not know about it? Why can't we just start talking? And that was really what drove me to saying on 4/20/2019, we're going to launch ChristianCannabis.com. And it has nothing to do with my ministry work here. I'm not calling myself the pastor of pot. I'm not I don't need the title. It's not it's never been important to me. I don't use it like, oh, I'm Dr. Gross or I'm Pastor Brother, whatever. I hate it. I think that's like, I don't need it. I only need it for the few weddings and funerals that I've done. That's it. That's the only time I've ever been asked or need to tell somebody. And so I wanted it to play out here. Just that's the inside peek. That's my heart behind this has been to help people and to start a conversation. And I get it that not everybody is ready for a conversation, but I think over the next few years, we're going to hear more and more. When I started XXX Church, there wasn't many porn ministries. I can probably tell you about 60 of them today, from all different religions, from secular to Mormon to Christian to, there was one accountability software. Now there's other filters. And I mean, we're going to see more people coming around on this conversation. But if we wait for those and we respond, that's just not who I am. It's great for other people. But for me, it was a matter of like, no, I want to go. And I've been waiting for that moment and that opportunity. And to be on the other side of it now, it's scary as hell. It's put some things towards, we've lost friends. We've lost support of a ministry now that I say I'm not leading the way of. We've been judged. I've been told I'm going through a midlife crisis. I've been, connected to Satan. You name it, like some of the most horrible things ever. And yet it's all right. It's fair. It's fair for people to project their experiences and I'm at peace with what we've done and I'm excited about where we're going. And, I get, it's not going to continue on this episode here or on Craig Brain to keep, you need to do that. No, it's just, there's a conversation going on over here. And if you're ready for it, I urge you to check it out. If you're interested and you have personal experiences with this, I think more people that are willing to share and talk about this stuff is how we're going to see some change and how we're going to see just a better understanding of something that I feel like has been misused, it's been mistreated, and it's been misunderstood. And my goal in starting Christian Cannabis was to, can we change all that on one website? No. But can we start moving in a different direction? So check that out. Check out what I got here on Craig Brain. And there's lots more. It's been super rewarding to just read. We posted some hate mail because come on. I've done that. People, why are you throwing down people from the church? There's some crazy stuff that people say that's just funny. I just go, man, we got to hold this loosely and go, hey, that's just crazy and that's kind of funny. And I'm just going to share that. And there's been some other stuff where you're like, you'll weep and you'll go, wow, that's real. And there's everything in between. So that's what happens when you start a new conversation. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Be back next time.
Thanks for thinking through Craig Brain. This podcast is only a small summarized part of a larger conversation. To read the full story, check out www.craigbrain.com and follow @Craig Gross on whatever social suits your fancy.